In 1788, a bill was passed through Parliament to build a canal from Greenfield to Flint in order to access a deeper water channel in the River Dee. But the canal failed to materialise, largely due to an increase in production from the Greenfield Valley mills and factories, which justified a widening and deepening of the river channel and the harbour facilities here at Greenfield. Extra wharves were constructed and improved upon the early 18th century examples, and quickly anything up to 40 vessels were taking the copper and cotton from Greenfield's mills and exporting them worldwide, making the harbour one of the busiest on the River Dee. So out there we got the River Dee. The small stream coming from inland is the Holywell stream, and this here is the remains of Greenfield Dock. And this stone quayside is now the only visible remains of Greenfield Harbour, and wharves were constructed here in the early 18th century, but greatly improved in the latter part of that century when industry in the valley began to increase. So this wharf more than likely dates in the 18th century, with the potential to it being 300 years old. In addition to the eastern wharf that we have still visible over there, a much larger western wharf was built here at Greenfield, and that would have been right here where this mud bank sits today. I don't know whether it's still there under the mud bank or whether it's been demolished. This whole site was renovated in 2010, I think it was, so it must have been in a pretty sorry state. But this longer wharf would have extended much further out into the Dee estuary to where, probably around where that boat's moored today. We'll take a look at the extended western wharves from this map diagram of Greenfield Harbour, dated 1870 and taken from the excellent Greenfield Valley book by K. Davis and C.J. Williams. Now, this gives an idea of how far the wharf jutted out into the river, and if I highlight the still existing eastern wharf, which we previously had a look at, this gives a good idea of the western wharf's location. In addition to the industry that was brought down from Greenfield Valley up there and the factories, and then imported out to Liverpool and then the rest of the world, a passenger ferry service was introduced here in 1802 using these longer wharves, and that would have took passengers across the Dee estuary to the Wirral on the other side, to an area known as Parkgate. And then in 1857 an additional service was started using the steam ferry Fanny, and that took passengers to Liverpool. But the inevitable demise was brought about in the mid-Victorian period when the railways came here. Now, along with that demise, it also brought the railways to Greenfield, and sidings came from the main line, which is just over there, and they would have been situated just here. But we'll do the railways in another part of this series. The tilting up of the River Dee has been a hazard to shipping ever since human beings began to navigate it. Over the years, it's been dredged and even diverted to enable shipping to reach Chester. So I'm down on the banks of the Dee estuary here at Greenfield Dock. We've got Chester and the Dee making its way inland that way. Over there we have the Wirral Peninsula, and over there we have the Irish Sea. But I've come down here to show the level of silting up that has gone on down here. So we're at low water at the moment, but right behind me is Greenfield Dock, and you can only just make it out, to be honest with you. You can see the tops of the boats, they're sitting on the current level of mud that is up there over that ridge. You can see the Holywell stream emptying into the Dee. Over there you can see the seaweed marks the high tide mark, so our water will rise a good, what, 15 feet, but the silt is a good 12 feet above me, I'd say. So even at extreme high tide, when the water manages to get into the harbour, you've only probably got a good 1 or 2 feet of water in the harbour itself, making it almost useless. Now, looking at the harbour from the landward side, the build-up of silt is evident, with just a foot or two of the quayside now visible. But here at Greenfield is one of the sites where an attempt was made to rectify the problem on a local level. So let's just walk over here a little. And if we look down here, try not to slip on the mud. And what we have here are the remains of an 18th century sluice. Let's just cross over this road. So this road crosses the stream on a small bridge or causeway. And if I put the camera over this fence, and there you can see the remains of that sluice which I saw just under there, under the bridge. This is an 18th century construction, so by the looks of it we've got plenty of contemporary work there. Could even the wood, I mean 300 years in salt water, it's highly unlikely, so that's probably been replaced at some time, but even looking at it, it's very old. But the stonework certainly could be contemporary. So what was this sluice for? Well, what we have here in this area here is what was known as a flushing reservoir. So you can see the wall where the reservoir was contained, bearing in mind once again we've got the notorious silt build-up, but this wall denotes the edge of it. That would have continued as this bank, you can see all the way down there to that spiky fence, and then you can see another bank coming up here, and then it's replaced by the stone wall again here. So a flushing reservoir. At high tide, or as the tide was coming in, this reservoir would fill up with water coming from the River Dee over there. At the point of high tide, the sluice would have then been closed, trapping that water in this reservoir. As the tide went out, the water level behind me would have dropped, keeping this water in, and then at point of low tide, that sluice would have then been opened and the water would have rushed out. And the idea was that it would have come out at such a force here that it would have cleared all of this silt away from the wharves and harbour walls. Something which looks like it could definitely need doing today, although it's probably beyond that now. Now, whether it was a success or not, well, it must have been a success, because the harbour here was maintained for many years, with wares coming out of Greenfield Valley up there, with the lower cotton mill and the battery mill and the wireworks, all of those factories coming down to the valley into this harbour and then going out to places like Liverpool and then being shipped around the rest of the world. I'm going to try and access the east side of the Flushing Reservoir. And let's see if I can get through. So, oh, there's a hole there. So what have we got here? Well, we've got a nice wall there. Its origin completely unknown. It could actually be just part of something else. And you can see our Flushing Reservoir. We've got our wall, bit of concrete there, but that looks very 18th century over there by the sluice gate. So if we walk along, we've got various pieces of stone sticking out of the earth here. So I would imagine that stone wall would have continued along here at one point, and whether it's still under there. In fact, where there's a few breaks in the soil here, and what can we see? Well, we can see a mishmash of stone and brick. So would that indicate that this is part of the wall, or is the fact that it's brick something else? And also something else, sorry ants, I've disturbed your nest, I'll put that back. If you look at this brick, that is distinctly curved. Now, is that because there's something wrong during the firing process, or is that on purpose? There's another brick here, and in fact, look, that one's curved as well. I would say that those bricks are fired that shape for a reason. Look, there's plenty of bricks just littered. They're not in any pattern, so I wonder what was going on here. Is this part of the original reservoir wall, or could these have been part of another structure, maybe buildings that were dotted along here? We've got some more down there, and they do sit right on the edge of the reservoir wall. Let's return to the 1870 map and look at the eastern edge of the Flushing Reservoir to search for an answer to those buried stones and bricks. Well, with no sign of any buildings marked on this map, and in fact it shows that railway sidings lay very close. The 1900 view from the National Library of Scotland shows similar. So I'd say that the bricks and stonework belong to the eastern wall of the Flushing Reservoir. This is the northern extremity of the flood or Flushing Reservoir. This little double arched bridge brings Holywell Stream under the railway line from Greenfield Valley, and this must have also contributed to the filling of the reservoir here as well. And interestingly enough, you can see the whole expanse of it. It went out in a kind of a triangle shape. So where I'm standing now would have been reservoir back in the day, and all you've got left today is this narrow channel which brings the Holywell Stream out to the River Dee.